There is a belief so deeply embedded in the way most people think about money that questioning it feels almost irresponsible. It is the belief that saving money is the safest thing you can do with it, that putting dollars aside in a bank account or a savings jar or a low yield certificate of deposit is the responsible, cautious, intelligent choice. And on the surface, that belief makes complete sense. You work hard, you spend less than you earn, you accumulate a balance, and that balance grows slowly over time. The number goes up, the account looks healthier, you feel more secure, but underneath that feeling of security, something else is happening. Something that the number on your screen doesn't show you. Something that the bank doesn't highlight in its marketing materials. And something that most financial education never quite explains clearly enough to change behavior. The money you save is losing value every single day you hold it. Not in a dramatic or catastrophic way, and not in a way that will empty your account overnight, but in a slow, invisible, mathematically certain way that compounds over years and decades into something significant. This process has a name: inflation. And while most people have heard the word, very few have truly internalized what it means for their stored savings over a 10 or 20 or 30-year horizon. Inflation is not just a news headline or an economic statistic. It is a mechanical force that operates on purchasing power, meaning it doesn't change the number in your account, it changes what that number can actually buy. And when the rate at which your savings account pays you interest is lower than the rate at which inflation is eroding your purchasing power, you are moving backward financially even while your balance moves forward numerically. To understand this at a mechanical level, consider a simple scenario. You save $10,000 and place it in a standard savings account, paying an annual interest rate of around 0.5%, which has been close to the national average for traditional savings accounts over much of the past decade. After 1 year, your balance reads $10,050. Meanwhile, inflation over that same year runs at approximately 3%, which is a historically modest and common figure. That means the basket of goods and services that cost $10,000 at the start of the year now costs $10,300. Your account grew by $50. Your purchasing power shrank by $300. The net result is a real loss of $250. Not on paper, not in the balance you can see, but in the actual economic weight of what you hold. Multiply that dynamic across 5 years, 10 years, or the span of a working career, and the compounding effect becomes sobering. A person who saves diligently for 30 years in low-yield instruments, never investing, never moving their money into assets that generate returns above inflation, can end their working life with a larger nominal balance and a meaningfully smaller real balance than they started with in terms of what that money can support. The discipline was real, the sacrifice was real, but the financial outcome was undermined by a system they were never fully taught to understand. What makes this particularly layered as a psychological phenomenon is that the savings trap doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like virtue. The cultural narrative around saving is almost entirely positive. Save more, spend less, be responsible, be patient, be disciplined. And those values are not wrong in themselves. The problem is that they were designed for and are most effective within a financial environment where savings vehicles kept pace with or outpaced inflation, which was true in certain historical periods, but has not been consistently true in the modern low-interest rate era. The advice calcified into conventional wisdom long after the conditions that made it useful had shifted, and it has been passed down through generations largely unchanged. The behavioral economics dimension of this is equally important to examine. Human beings are naturally loss-averse, meaning we feel the pain of losing something more acutely than we feel the pleasure of gaining something of equivalent value. This wiring makes the idea of putting money into investment vehicles, where the balance can visibly decline in the short term, feel psychologically dangerous in a way that a slowly eroding savings account does not. A savings account never shows you a loss. The number either stays the same or goes up. That visual stability feels safe, and the brain registers it as safe, even when the underlying economic reality is one of gradual depletion. Investments, by contrast, show volatility. They show red numbers. They show temporary declines that the brain processes as failure, even when the long-term trajectory is meaningfully upward. So, people systematically choose the option that feels safer but produces worse real outcomes over time. Not because they are irrational, but because the emotional feedback loop they are responding to is misaligned with the actual financial mechanics at play. This is also where the systemic dimension becomes visible. The financial infrastructure most accessible to lower and middle income households, standard checking accounts, basic savings accounts, money market accounts at large retail banks, consistently offers yields well below inflation. Meanwhile, the instruments most likely to generate real returns over time, diversified index funds, real estate, equity in businesses, require either a meaningful upfront capital threshold, a tolerance for short-term volatility, or both. The result is a structural asymmetry, where the households most dependent on their savings growing in real terms are the ones with the least access to the vehicles that make that growth possible. While those with larger capital bases can more easily absorb volatility and access higher return instruments, the savings trap is not equally distributed. It presses hardest on those who can least afford to lose ground. What a clearer understanding of this system suggests is not that saving is wrong, but that saving into low-yield instruments indefinitely, without a deliberate plan to move that capital into something with a real return above inflation, functions less like building wealth and more like slowing the rate at which purchasing power declines. Saving is a necessary first step, a staging ground, a way to accumulate enough capital to make a next move possible. But for many people, the staging ground has become the destination, and the next move was never clearly defined or explained. The financial system does not lose anything when that happens. The bank earns its spread. The economy continues to inflate. Only the individual saver falls quietly behind, their discipline intact, their real wealth gently, invisibly diminishing. Understanding this doesn't require cynicism about the financial system or abandonment of careful habits. It requires a more precise mental model, one that distinguishes between nominal wealth, the number you can see, and real wealth, the purchasing power that number actually represents. Once that distinction becomes visceral rather than abstract, the question stops being, how much am I saving? And starts being, at what rate is my capital growing relative to inflation? And what is my plan for moving stored capital into something that outpaces the erosion? Those are quieter questions than most financial media asks. They don't generate urgency or fear, but they are the questions that, asked consistently over time, tend to produce meaningfully different outcomes. The savings trap is not a conspiracy. It is not a deliberate design to harm anyone. It is the intersection of outdated financial advice, human psychological wiring, and a structural system that benefits from capital sitting still. Recognizing it changes nothing overnight, but it changes the frame through which every future financial decision gets made. And that shift in frame, quiet and undramatic as it is, turns out to be one of the more consequential things a person can do with what they understand about money.